everyone. My name is Diana Pearl. I'm the Deputy Brands Editor at Adweek, and welcome to today's episode of Adweek Together. Before we start, I wanted to remind you that if you find this content valuable, you can support Adweek's journalism with an Adweek Pro subscription. They're available at adweek.com/offer. And now for today's episode. I'm so excited about our guest today. On the show, we have Venz Box, the president and co-founder of Reward Style and Like to Know It, to discuss the influencer economy. Amber, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Diana.
And just a reminder for our audience at home, you can ask Amber questions on LinkedIn if you have anything you would like to hear from her. So we can just dive right into it. To start on a more kind of foundational general level, what is the state of the influencer industry right now? I feel like there's been a lot of talk about how this is impacting the influencer industry, how this is and this obviously being coronavirus and COVID-19, how it's impacting the industry, how it's impacting people's perception of influencers. And you're obviously at the center of that as the president of Reward Style and Like to Know It. What impact have you seen, and has it been severe? Has it been minimal? What sort of impact are you seeing on the industry at large?
Yeah, I think it's important to start with that macro environment conversation. And I would say there's really kind of three key things that are going on right now that are driving the outcomes that we're seeing. First of all is, of course, that retailers are transitioning their resources online as selling in-store just remains limited or restricted really for the foreseeable future. So, as a society, we've really gone from 10% of our shopping happening online to nearly 100% today. Really, influencers have been growing in their role as a distributed retail sales force over the last 9 years. And now that retailers are unable to rely on their in-store sales force, they're really leaning into that muscle to modernize and move their businesses forward. And so influencers have become their new distributed sales force. The second thing that's really important is just that consumers are spending their discretionary time online. And so, they're not going to movies, they're not going to restaurants, to parties, to bars. They're actually spending a lot of that time. It's being repurposed into social media, into their phone, into apps. And of course, when you think about what's in those apps that they're spending their time on, it's actually content that was created by, largely our clients. So by content creators. And so they're consuming a lot more from influencers today. The quotes from across different social platforms, whether it's video or still imagery, is really averaging out about 30% more time that we're now seeing consumers spend inside of influencer content. And then I think the third thing that's part of this just macro environment is that digital marketing was already, represented more than half of advertising. So it's something that marketers were very comfortable with. And our biggest brands really were already identifying three buckets of spend. Google and their properties, Facebook and their properties, and then influencers, the three largest. And today, when you look at how brands are spending in advertising, it's really focused right now on finesse and finesse more than ever before. And in fact, in March, New York Times reported that the brand direct advertising, so think of a brand advertising their own brand, that clicks and conversion were down materially across the large tech players. And really, as that consumer response to brand advertising weakens, retailers are depending on the humanization of the brand that influencers offer. So driving sales from the blogger's own distribution, whether that's their site, their social media, the Like to Know It shopping app, and really it's working for everyone. So in the last 6 months, consumers purchased more than $1 billion in products from our retail partners, starting with the influencer. Half of that purchasing actually came through the Like to Know It shopping app, and conversion and sales are up materially across the influencer industry.
Wow. And kind of on a more micro level, obviously the two main income streams for influencers are brand partnerships and affiliate sales. And anecdotally, just in the reporting I've done, I've heard affiliate sales are way up because, just like you said, it's gone from, 10% of shopping happening online to 100% of shopping happening online. Have you seen a greater impact on affiliate sales or brand partnerships, and what's sort of been that impact on both?
Yeah, so they are both up. And both up meaningfully. But when you look at, like you said, the commission on sales business, so influencers actually driving sales to these retailers versus the brand dollars, the commission on sales business is up just in a huge way. When you look at Like to Know It alone, it's up over 300%. And brands are really leaning into what they can trust and rely on right now. Many of our partners are publicly traded partners, and those that aren't still have investors that are very interested in driving outcomes. And so by leaning into performance marketing, brands are paying with what we call house money. So the sales are already coming in. They're only paying for what actually converts. And as we talked about, these influencers are today their distributed sales force. And so these are the people they're relying on. And our healthy brands have really upwards of 5,000, 10,000 influencers that are actively driving sales into their platforms. You think about almost like a modern day Mary Kay, where you have people in the field actually driving to your outlets. And this is something that's reliable, it's high ROI, and it allows you to reach regions, niches, and socioeconomic pockets that are otherwise really unattainable. And those nuances and the nuance of message becomes so important. So we really see performance marketing standing out as a big area of growth in the influencer space.
Yeah, definitely. And I know at Reward Style, I'd like to know you guys have rolled out some new tools, particularly last week, to better support influencers and better support brands. I'd love to hear about what you guys have going on right now.
Yeah. Well, really, as the network scales in terms of our overall sales that we're driving to brands, and just the amount of influencers driving those sales and our consumer monthly active users in the Like to Know It app, we've been building products that our brands can use to monitor the daily data around their sales force. And that's increasingly important today. So the first step in driving better results with reward style influencers is to understand how you're performing today. We have 5,000 brands that are integrated into the reward style platform and commissioning influencers. It's everybody from luxury to high street to drugstore brands, the big box guys, really everyone is using reward style in order to incentivize influencers to talk about their products. And so we've actually created a free platform that we released last week to our 5,000 integrated brands. It allows them to track something that we call RPIs, which is revenue producing influencers. So think about this as that distributed sales force. You're able to get insight into your RPIs, understand your traffic and revenue sources, and for the first time, actually take a look at your Like to Know It performance across all of those metrics. Like to Know It, the shopping app, is the fastest growing, highest converting channel, and it's totally reshaping the retail landscape. Just 3 years after the app launched, it's growing more than 300%, and it's driving huge results for these brands. And they're leaning in, and we believe that it's critical that they understand this new dominant channel. Our goal at Reward Style is for the brands to be empowered, and we want to empower these digital retail marketers to optimize in the influencer channel based on the outcomes that are now required of them, which is, of course, driving sales.
Yeah, definitely. And, in terms of influencers having to pivot their content, I think about a travel influencer. Obviously, not much travel happening right now. How has Reward Style and Like to Know It been working with the influencers in your roster to pivot their content? And are there, certain influencers that are perhaps having an easier time with that pivot? If you were somebody who was a food blogger, you'd have to imagine that this is like your moment because everyone's cooking.
No, exactly. And I think, there's been a misconception both inside and outside of the influencer industry that people are following the pretty girl, the cool guy, the one that's, flying all over the world doing the greatest things. And really what we found at Reward Style is we're looking at the objective measure of sales as a measure of influence. And what we've seen is that consumers want a hero. They want a guide, not a hero. So when I say hero, think about the gorgeous glam girl that's standing at Fashion Week, head to toe dressed in a luxury brand. Those women are often tapped for collaboration deals, for example. But what the consumer is really wanting, what they're leaning into, especially during stay home and during this era of COVID, is a guide. So think of a guide not as the girl who's standing there not telling you where she got her dress and how she got into that show, but think of it as a best friend or a cooler older sister who can get you into places and introduce you to new interesting people and restaurants and places to visit. So it's that best friend who's sharing all that information with you. And the best influencers are really they're multi-platform, they're multi-category, and they're sharing their full life content. And those influencers have been able to easily transition into COVID because they were always just telling you the things that they were doing and that they were discovering. And they were always being extra helpful when they were doing that. So think about the influencer. Really, influence is a hospitality business. So if you're an influencer and someone says you have great skin, what are you doing? The hero doesn't tell you what she's doing. She'll never answer that question. And, and on an ongoing basis, you're not going to see any sort of information from her, whether that's, where she's shopping, what hotel she stayed in, how she got into that show, where she found that dress. The guide is going to always tell you all of those things and make it really easy for you to get to those assets. So when they answer your question and say, "Oh, I've got this new mascara and it's fantastic," and they give you a swipe up link to it, I tell you to go check it out on their Like to Know It. It's very organic and it feels very seamless, and it's just part of how followers experience that influencer versus the influencer who never tells you anything, but then suddenly is saying, "I got new mascara and you should buy it here, and this is a hashtag ad." And so we're seeing that those multi-platform, multi-category, full life content creators who are really acting as a guide are the ones that are standing out today.
Yeah, for sure. And then sort of in, creating content today and during this era, obviously there's, the financial reality, especially with, platforms like to Know It, that, ultimately selling product creates income, much needed income for these influencers. This is their job and how they support themselves and their families. But obviously there's also a ton of financial uncertainty right now. Lots of people have lost their jobs. And, I'm a longtime consumer of influencer content before even the word influencer existed. And, I think people want to be very conscious of that. And you see sort of this balance and this, I don't want to say a struggle for balance, but an effort to maintain a balance between being understanding while still, also responding to the questions that they're still getting. How are you sort of helping influencers navigate that balance?
Yep. So through the framework of a guide, people are still needing to consume things, whether that's food, we talked about food influencers, whether that's the food that they're eating, or, they're still using shampoo, they're still working out. And actually, when we look across categories, all categories are seeing growth, but in home specifically, I, for example, had to go get a desk and a new chair. I didn't have a home office. And so, for example, in home, we've seen a 40% lift in sales, a 45% increase in conversion. For fitness, so influencers are no longer able to go to their own trainers or go to their gyms. So we've seen actually 150% increase in sales in fitness and a 50% increase in conversion, because it's, here's my workout. I'm going to show you my workout in bits and pieces. I'm also going to tell you the equipment that I'm using to do it. So while you're staying home, beauty and wellness has been a major trend, really with our top earning posts featuring even only beauty products, for example. So I know even before the call, we were talking about the things that we've been trying out, the new, lip glosses and the things that we've been kind of trying as you and I are going on different lives. We see that sales in that category is up 100% and the conversions increased by 75%. And so all of that under that framework of a guide, people are still consuming things, they're still doing things at home. And so how can you help them to be their best selves when they can't leave the house? As part of that, we really leaned in at the beginning when the government asked us, or anyone with a platform, to really encourage people to stay home. And so we started the LTK. It was called #StayHomeWithLTK. We presented that to our network of influencers, and we had 34,000 posts within the first 48 hours. And this is where influencers are sharing with their audiences all the things they can do while they stay home, how they can transition their lives into that home space. And, we talked about it at the beginning, but really, influencers are able to humanize a brand and place it in that appropriate context for the consumer. And we see that people are still shopping. So for example, in April alone, people bought $200 million worth of product from reward style influencers. And while I absolutely agree with you that, product callouts can be very distasteful without an audience that's conditioned to shop and without an audience in the right place. So you think about these channels for intent. So when you go into a YouTube, an Instagram, a TikTok, you're not opening those apps to go shopping. So if an influencer is constantly pushing shopping to you in those places, it feels maybe distasteful or a little bit out of place. And we see conversion rate much lower in those places. Whereas the Like to Know It shopping app provides influencers a place that they can go publish as much content as they like, really because it's a shopping app. So anybody who's going to open that app is ready to go shopping and wants to be guided in that way. And so that has been a really nice, shelter for influencers to be able to create content there, and just a place where consumers can go and it's in the appropriate context for the season.
Yeah, for sure. And then, kind of going off of that, we've seen, there's been, some discussion, some headlines that have picked up discussion around brands cutting their affiliate programs or putting them on pause during this moment, particularly as some brands, like a J. Crew are under financial distress and filing for bankruptcy. I know that you and I have talked before, and it's fairly minimal in terms of brands that have done this, but what have you seen on that end? And do you think it's sort of a misguided decision, considering this is some of the most cost-effective marketing you can do, since you don't pay until there's a sale?
No, exactly. So when we look across our entire network, and we do believe, as with every other industry, that we are able to now reflect back, and that we're kind of moving to the other side of what's happening with COVID, and we're very aware of the fragility of certain brands, and had been watching certain brands for a long time. And what I'd point to is less than 2% of our platform has made decisions like the ones that you the brand that you talked about earlier. So there were a handful of brands that were in a fragile financial place before, and this was just the final straw. There were some brands that had a large offline liability, of course, with a large store footprint and with a large sales staff, that paused maybe for a week or so and then came back online. But you're absolutely right. With influencers, you're paying with house money. You're only paying when it works. And when, you got to think about your consumer as a brand, you still want the same thing, COVID, not COVID. You still want a lot of people to buy a lot of things. Well, how do you reach a lot of people during COVID? You reach them through the integrated influencer content, and then you only pay on it when it converts. And so, for an investor, for a shareholder, influencer is a place that they're very happy for those dollars to be spent today. And it's something that's working. And I believe, really why we're seeing a huge shift of dollars into this platform.
Yeah, for sure. And something I think too, in cutting an affiliate program, are influencers then going to be less likely to link to that retailer? And then does that result in even more lost, revenue than they would have gotten with the, having to pay with the affiliate program?
Yep. And a nuance that's worth pointing out, there's been reporting about what I'm going to call, the affiliate industry. RewardStar really doesn't sit within that space. And so I will also point to, reports about people cutting their affiliate programs. Really what they mean is that they're cutting coupon sites. They're cutting what they're paying to other types of, platforms, technology channels that have used that affiliate technology. In many cases, that reporting did not include RewardStyle, and RewardStyle was not, hurt by that. In fact, oftentimes people were moving budget from coupons, for example, into the influencer space to make sure that influencers were continuing to talk about their brand. Certainly, influence is a business, just like fashion is a business, health is a business. And so influencers are incentivized to talk about, brands that are going to pay them to do such. So you certainly do see, a fall off on content creation when it comes to those brands. But like I said, you're looking at less than 2% of the entire platform that experience that. And many of them have already come back. Some we expect to come back. And really what we're seeing is that, right now influencers are producing on average 26% more shopping content year over year. And consumers are buying 42% more per post. So when I talk about this being a business, this is something that our influencers are very well aware of. When they're talking about a product, they're looking at, how does this retailer convert for me? What's my conversion rate at that store? What is the depth of inventory with this product? What does their sizing run look like? When does this person typically pay out? These are all things that factor in, because ultimately influencers are supporting themselves and their families. They have mortgages and mouths to feed just like everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. And then, something that's also a discussion that's really, I think, kind of hit a peak during this time. There was, I think, particularly a few weeks ago, there was, discussion about what is the responsibility of an influencer. We saw some who kind of came under fire for either, a few for leaving New York during shelter-in-place orders. And I think that did just sort of generate this larger discussion about the responsibility of influencers. It was kind of the high-profile actions of a few, just getting a lot of attention. What do you view as the responsibility of having influence and being an influencer? And do you think that COVID-19 has changed that discussion?
Certainly it has. So, anytime you're put in a new scenario, the way that you act in that scenario is going to, dictate perhaps your future. And so I think more influencers are becoming more aware of their sustaining power, whether that's greater or smaller than they thought. Influencers are also making choices for their families during this time, but choices have, either benefits or penalties. And so what you're seeing is that, ultimately the brands are the boss, right? The brands are paying the bills. And so if you're doing something that's offensive to a large group of people, then you are self-selecting out of this industry. And truly that's what we see. And so, it's very, the influencer industry is very Darwinian, right? And so consumers are voting with their wallet. If they stop voting for you, then your career is finished. And there's a very an interesting balance that influencers have to strike in order to stay in the game. And there's an authenticity that has to be there, but there's also a level of responsibility for those followers. And so you do see that influencers have been penalized for the choices that they made during this time. Again, I would point to there's a handful where that's the case, whereas Reward Style works with tens of thousands across the globe. And so certainly those that were maybe more celebrity type influencers were pointed out in the press. But this is, it's true across any industry. Decisions have consequences, and you see that here as well. But when we look at the ones that are doing very well and made great decisions, it's those who have participated in those stay home campaigns, who are multi dimensional, who are multi category, and who really have leaned into their performance-based compensation. For an influencer, that's something that's reliable. When you look at those that were depending on the collaborations business or kind of like brand deals, at this moment when many brand deals are kind of on pause or are not growing, or people are just now saying, hey, from a marketing perspective, they have to drive outcomes. And so they're saying, what are the sales that this person's driving? What is the real value of this campaign that I'm putting forward? And I think that will be a lasting impact that we see in this industry, is that is now the number one metric. We've moved through different seasons of metrics that are important in the influencer industry, whether that was page views or likes or followers or engagement. The number one metric today for an influencer is their GMV. It's their ability to drive sales. And so that's, I believe, a lasting impact of COVID, and something that has moved us forward probably 3 years.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of just going right off of that, what do you think will be the lasting impacts of COVID on the influencer industry? How do you think it's going to, change how influencers approach their content and approach their businesses? And, do you see any changes in the way that Reward Style and Like to Know It approaches their business and your relationship with influencers?
Yeah, so a bunch of answers for that. The first thing is that marketers are being forced to sharpen right now, and they are really, really focused on those outcomes, not just in the influencer industry, across all of their marketing decision base. And so that by nature is going to change the influencer industry, because it's going to force those who didn't lean into any sort of performance-based metrics or didn't use that as a critical part of the analytics that they were looking at. It will, unfortunately, I believe that you'll see influencers to fall away. I think when you look at the platform, so for example, Reward Style did a study, it was even 2 years ago, just looking at the quote influencer marketing platforms that existed in the market. At the time, there were over 800 of them. And I believe that you're about to see also kind of a big shakeout of those that are providing value to marketers and those that aren't. And as you look to ROI and true ROI, and what are the actual sales that are being driven from these campaigns, that's going to be the number one metric going forward, and it will allow for the noise to kind of fall away within those platforms. Similarly with influencers, the influencers who were the cool girl at the bar, who were the hero, who didn't have a true relationship with their follower, who were someone that was admired, but they didn't have a relationship with, I would also believe that you're going to see that fall away, or you're going to see them shift towards that performance-based compensation. And it's important ultimately for any influencer to understand that, because you think about all the things that influencers do on the back of their business. So it's not just about the business of influence, it's also then what you do next. Are you opening a hotel? Are you starting a line? Are you, what are you creating? What are you doing with your platform? And so I think that, that's going to be something that's really important. For Reward Style, we see this as a transformational moment in the industry that we've been building for almost 10 years now. And so when we look at the opportunity set that's in front of our influencers and our brands today, it makes us want to invest. I just had a board call yesterday, and it was getting the blessing on massive investments across our brands, across our influencers. And so you will see more, service going to our influencers as far as coaching, helping them how to understand how to best take, really harness the opportunity that's in front of them. You'll see better brand tools coming from Reward Style, as a platform as brands are able to log in, make their own choices, make better choices within the influencer industry. And I think you're going to see a lot of great just technology products coming out for our consumers. So the Like to Know It shopping app has become a really critical piece of what it is that our influencers are powering and what is offered to our retailers, and consumers are loving it. In the last year, we've actually hired our CTO, who was previously highly ranked at IBM. He has a long history, about hundreds of patents, truly. The things that we've been working on with him, I think, will be, again, transformational for the retail industry. And it's all about making things easy and convenient for the customer, so that the Like to Know It app is the #1 place for them to go shopping, and that we're able to make retailers and brands of all sizes successful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great note to end on. Amber, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a great discussion, and always lovely to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you, Adweek. Thanks for having me.
And viewers, tomorrow at noon Eastern Time, we'll be talking to Amanda Getz, the VP of Marketing at The Knot, to discuss life stage marketing with our very own Co-In. And a reminder, you can find all of our episodes of Adweek Together at adweek.com/together. And you can sign up for an Adweek Pro subscription to support our journalism at adweek.com/offer. Thank you for spending part of your day with us, and take care.